Hello everyone, welcome to the skill exchange session on Asset Masterclass. Today we will discuss on the key pillars that truly unlock the efficiency and control of your digital asset management strategy. My name is Deepak Khitawat and I'm working as a principal engineer software at Palo Alto Networks. Here is a brief introduction of me. I am privileged to be part of Adobe community from a long period of time and I'm currently an AEM champion. Here is the brief agenda of what we will cover today. We will first discuss on the power of assets in the digital landscape. Then we will discuss into the automation, core of automation, that is workflows. Then we will discuss into access and permissions. We will now connect all the dots, that is integration strategies will be discussed. We will discuss at the end best practices and key takeaways from this session. Then we will open the floor up for Q&A. Assets are not just a simple place where you can dump your images and videos. Think of it as a central hub, a place to manage all your digital content and a single source of truth for that. Entire life cycle of an asset, right from ingestion, that is upload, to approval, reviewer, archiver or deletion, is maintained by assets. It helps to make sure that every team member, every campaign follows the same version of the assets, hence improving brand consistency and reusability of the asset. It makes sure that the different team can collaborate for assets in a single unified platform, removing that chaos and confusion of emails and all. It improves efficiency. It makes sure that the different renditions are compatible for web, mobile, leveraging multi-channel delivery. It leverages smart tags via intelligent tagging as well as provides full text and metadata search. It makes sure that the millions of assets are being placed at one place and they are rendered to the user in real time, removing any performance lag. Now we will discuss the workflows. Workflows are the core of automation. So what are them? They are automated sequence of steps to process and manage assets. Why workflows are so important for assets? They help to automate repetitive tasks. For example, sending notifications, generating renditions, or extracting metadata. They enforce business rules. So all the compliance will be followed by using workflows. Since all the assets follow a particular predefined path, it helps to enhance the quality of the assets and consistency is maintained. The time to market for the campaigns is reduced using this automation, which is a real world requirement. All the manual efforts are reduced and it frees up the time for providing and maintaining strategy by our team members. Now in this slide, we will discuss on an example scenario when a new marketing image is being created. The designer uploads that initial draft to a particular folder, which is being reviewed by marketing manager once he gets the notification of that. Once the feedback is left, the designer makes changes appropriately and it's routed to a concerned person like a brand director. Once it is approved, the asset is automatically moved to a different folder, done with the different steps as per the business requirement, and then it can be published downstream to website or different social channels. And once the campaign is finished, the asset can be deleted or moved to an archive folder. There are some out-of-the-box workflows in DAM I want to cover. I will start with the most important and fundamental one, DAM update asset workflow. This is triggered whenever the asset is uploaded or updated. Some of the key steps with this workflow are rendition generation for different touch points like web, mobile, metadata extraction, processing smart text. It basically makes your assets ready for a multi-channel uses. One difference in cloud service is heavy lifting for asset processing, that is metadata extraction and rendition generation are offloaded to asset compute microservice. This helps for performance scalability Now, DAM update asset is a transient workflow for clouds where its instance is not persisted in the JCR repository, hence providing for a superior scalability. Here is the flow in the cloud service. Whenever an asset is uploaded, the binary is uploaded to the cloud storage, and all the requests like metadata extraction and rendition generation are taken care by asset compute microservices. And once it is done, AEM is notified and AEM updates the reference with the new renditions. Some other workflows I want to discuss. One is DAM metadata write back. It makes sure that the consistency is achieved between the asset metadata and the original file. Any changes in the metadata, this workflow writes back to the binary file. Dynamic media process asset workflow is very powerful one. It helps to handle different image sets like your spin images, 360 images, flipped images, and helps for video encoding. Whenever the video is uploaded in different byte rates and resolution, it is encoded and served to the user, reducing the lagging and all. Other important workflow I want to discuss is request for activation. So it takes care of two steps. One is concerned group is sent for review, and once it is reviewed, then it is published to live. These out-of-the-box workflows are very robust foundation, but in most of the cases, we should extend them or optimize as per the business needs. For customizing workflows, Workflow Console is very important. It can be found under Tools. You go to Workflows, and then you can create your models. So here you can customize it using out-of-the-box component and multiple components provided by assets. Some core workflow components I want to discuss. One is process steps. All the Java code can be implemented using workflow process interface or ECMA scripts to handle complex logics. For example, doing an integration with external system, we can achieve using this process step. Next is the participant step. If there is some task for review, it is assigned to a specific users or groups with this participant step, and post approval only it will go to the next step. Other important step is dynamic participant step. Here the group to which the task is to be assigned is computed at runtime. For example, if an asset is belonging to a German domain, then it will be assigned to a German manager group. And if asset is belonging to the English US side, then it will be assigned to the US manager. OR and AND splits are very helpful. OR is used for conditional branching. For example, an asset is sent for approval, then either it will be published or it will be sent back for the changes. AND split is helpful for parallel processing. For example, for an asset to be published to live, we should make sure that the SEO, that is the metadata, is proper and the content and imagery is proper. Post both steps are taken care, then only it will go to the next step with AND split. Other important step I want to mention is the container step. For example, a workflow is very complex. So group of related steps can be moved to a different workflow, and that workflow can be used as a container step. This helps to clean up our already complex workflow. There are a lot of real world customization examples. Some of the important examples I have mentioned here, like applying dynamic watermarking, integrating notifications with Slacks or Teams whenever it is sent for reviewal steps, and we can push the metadata into different downstreams like PIM and others. I also want to discuss some of the advanced workflows which are event driven. Whenever there are changes in JCR properties, for example, a node is created or a node is updated or an asset is moved to a different folder or an replication event is triggered, workflow launchers can be initiated. Workflow launchers will internally call the model and it can take care of the proper steps. And for more advanced steps, we can use a custom event listeners and invoke them programmatically using the workflow API. So I have also shared the screenshots of the different types, how it is there. The path is basically a payload, an asset path where the launcher is triggered based on the events like created, deleted, replicated, or moved to a different folder. Now, I also want to discuss on some of the best practices of workflow we should follow. One is we should always optimize the performance. The workflow is a sequence of large number of the steps, and some steps can take a longer time. Hence, we should use the async execution so that that long thread can be running separately and it avoids to block the workflow engine. Since CPU and memory is very important, we should make sure that our Java code is very lightweight and we should not traverse the whole node to find the asset. We should use SQL or query builder for traversals. We should make sure that only needful renditions are being processed to optimize the asset processing. We should make sure that our workflow models are versioned. For example, the workflow model path might be either conf or where, and we should push it to Git so that it can be tracked and people can make the changes appropriately and know the history when it was updated or modified. We should always make sure we are resilient with error handling. Sometimes external systems may be down, so we should always implement a retry logic. We should make sure that our logs are very robust so it can be easily debugged by the team. We always should have a fallback mechanisms in place so that any failures can be handled at our end. And at the last, we should use workflow exception. So we know that this workflow is a failure and a notification can be sent to a group or a logic can be updated as per the need. Now we will be discussing on one of the important aspects for governance, how to control the access, which is the foundation for asset security. Why permissions are so much important for DAM? First, it makes sure that our assets are safeguarded and only confidential assets can be accessed by appropriate users and groups. It makes sure that the approved assets are being published. So, for example, if a logo is outdated, it will not be published because it will not be accessible. It will help to enforce regulatory compliance with different rules like GDPR and other privacy laws. It makes sure that unauthorized deletions and changes are not being done since a proper users have proper permissions. What is the permission framework behind it? It is based on your Jackrabbit access control list mechanism, which offers granular control, but we should have a great understanding of the same. It is managed through users, groups, and privileges, which we will be discussing in the next slide. So now we will discuss on what are the key or the building blocks of our asset security. First is users and groups. Users are very simple. The individual accounts that log into our AEM asset instance are named as users. What are groups? Groups are collection of the users. They can be either system groups or they can be custom groups as per our need and department. And we should always take a note to always assign the permissions to groups, not individuals. So if some new user has come, we can remove it from the group and add accordingly if the new user comes. So what are privileges? Privileges are basically permissions assigned to those users and groups, what they can do. So they can read, write, add the child nodes, remove nodes, manage the versions, replicate. So these are some of the privileges for users and groups. Now, most important are access control list are the permissions which are provided. So what are they? They are rules which are specified to a specific path. So that path can be either a folder or an asset itself. Internally, they contains asset control entities which allows like grant or deny privileges to users or groups. Like what they can access, read or write is decided by ACs, that is access control entities, which are part of our ACLs. Few points to note that permissions are always inherited down the content tree and deny rule takes precedence over the allow rule, which we will discuss in the further slides. Here is the UI for permissions I wanted to explain. So for the group DAM users, you will see ACs listed here. And on the right side, you can like add a new path and there provide the privileges like JCR, read, etc. And the type is also whether it's allow or a deny. So how we can access it? We can go to tools, security, users and group. There we can create a custom groups or update the ACs for the current groups. For the asset folder levels, setting permission is very important and how we can achieve is listed here. So we should go to that particular folder, then we should go to the properties tab, and from properties, we should open the permissions tab as we can see in the right hand side screenshot. There we can add a user or a group and the roles we can add it, whether it's an owner, editor or a viewer. So this helps to manage our assets. And as we discussed that the permissions are inherited down the content tree. So for a parent folder, permissions will be inherited by all the child folders and assets. The permission evaluation logic works like deny always takes precedence over allow. More specific paths will always take precedence over the general paths. For example, if the parent folder is /content/dem, then a child path like /content/dem/a.jpg will take a precedence over the parent and its permissions will be used. We should always consider the orders of access control entities in our permission design. So we should make sure that our orders are proper in there, since first match wins for the same set of permissions. Now we will discuss on some of the core principles for the permission. First important is principle of least privileges. If a user needs read, just give him the read permission, don't give him the write permission. We should always have the group based permission, so it's very easy, and if someone is new, then we can add him to the group, and if someone we want to remove, we can easily remove. So it's very simplification of our audit process. And we should always keep this permission simple. We should not make it complex, since by default all the users and groups have a deny permission by assets. So we should selectively give them an allow based permission. We should use deny only when it's sparingly urgent, and we want to provide a very specific group or a user a deny permission, then only use deny. As always, use allow. From an operational point of view, there are some best practices which we should be taking a note of. We should make sure that our permissions are audited regularly. So any permissions which we are not needing, we can remove it. We should make sure that all our lower environments have the same permissions so that it can be properly tested and issues are not carried forward to the higher environments. We should document our permissions so it's very helpful for the team, and new team members can also easily understand. We should always make sure that our permissions are replicated to the publisher, since they will be serving the content downstream to different platforms like websites or social. Since we have discussed on the workflows and permissions, now comes the integration, which is the most important point. So think of your assets as a central hub. It's not a silo, it's a connector, and it should be integrated with different marketing and technological stack. Why integration is so much needful? One is all the assets are aligned across all the systems in real time, which helps for a consistent brand experience, since the same visuals are delivered to each and every channel. Content delivery is very fast with this. We can make sure that our already great metadatas are enriched by integration with different systems like PIM, CRM, or AI services. It also ensures that workflows are optimized for other systems also, like CMS and PIM or other commerce platforms. So integration is possible with large number of the systems. In this slide, I mentioned some of the important systems which we are using in our projects. Like PIM, we can integrate to sync the product images descriptions. We can use a CRM for personalized asset delivery. We can use an ERP for enriching the assets with business data. We can use a marketing automation platform integration for Marketo to feed campaign ready assets directly. We can integrate with CDP to provide the customized assets based on the user past history. We can integrate with CDM to deliver the assets in very fast manner. We can integrate with Creative Cloud like Photoshops and others. There are some integration pattern for assets. I will be discussing on the 3-4 important ones which we are using. First is AEM as the master dam. So AEM is a single source of truth, an authoritative source for all your contents. All the assets flow from AEM to the downstream like web, social. So this is happening for all the new projects as well as for the large enterprises where AEM is the primary content hub. There are some legacy projects, like very old projects which were not earlier in AEM, that can be having AEM as a consumer or a slave dam. So where assets are present in that system like a legacy dam, and they are slowly ingested into AEM, and that AEM assets are served downstream to the website and other socials. So slowly they are moving from the external systems to AEM. Other important model which is used in most of the projects is the hybrid model, where some of the assets are managed by AEM and some are managed by the external systems. And one is optimization by CDN is very helpful. So CDN, if it is dynamic media, already dynamic media takes care for rendering those assets. Else we can use the CDN like Akamai or Cloudflare to make sure that the assets are served to the users in very fast speed. For example, if a user from India requests the assets and the server is in US, then an ad server near India should serve that content. Now I want to discuss on some of the use cases for integration after discussing all the integration pattern. One is we can sync the content from the platforms to AEM. For example, PIM, we can use the product images, SKU details, and use a workflow internally by process step so that AEM assets are linked to that PIM metadata. We can make sure that AEM assets are served to different platforms like Marketo or social. So all the approved assets can be served for marketing campaigns. We should have an integration with dynamic media and CDN, as I have mentioned previously. And also we should have an integration currently with most of the tools like Photoshop, Illustrator, where the photographer can directly make the updates to AEM, and then they can integrate and leverage those after checking in the Photoshop. Now discussing on the integration, there are some of the governance which we should take and incorporate into our asset projects. We should regularly do troubleshooting and do an operational visibility. We should see like which workflows are active, which are completed. We should regularly monitor the logs. We should always monitor the queue health. We should see which workflows are stuck, which are slow, so we can optimize and make them better. We should use SQL2 and query builder queries instead of traversals. And we should use the Sling console to do the diagnostics. We should make sure that the proper life cycle of an asset is being implemented at our end using any needful workflow and process. We should make sure that the folder follows a proper regular convention, and the asset uses is being reviewed. So if an asset is redundant, we should get rid of it. We should always make sure that performance tuning is done by using Lucene or Oak queries wherever we have to faster asset search. Our infrastructure, CPU, memory should be always advanced, and we should always leverage dispatcher and CDN for delivering in very high speed. Now I want to mention some of the key takeaways from the session. One is workflows, which are a source of automation, are very powerful, and we should leverage them into our asset projects. We should make sure that the proper governance is taken care with applying proper permissions. We should make sure that integration is there for assets to all available digital ecosystem to enhance the maximum potential of assets. We should make sure that we always do a regular monitoring, regular troubleshooting, and we optimize our current AEM assets implementation so that it is more efficient and performant in future. We should always establish the clear policies for asset management and security, since governance helps and is very useful. Now we will open the floor for Q&A.